Recording in progress.
Colleagues, if everyone could take their seats, please. I'm going to ask Councilor Farrell to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council, although as you can see, we're starting 45 minutes earlier tonight because the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer Yo are going to be giving us a presentation on the capital improvement plan after first call. We have two items on second call tonight. Let me just identify for the record who is participating remotely this evening. I have Councilor Grossman, Humphrey, Vice President Kalis, and Councilor Gentile. So there are four of us remote, and we are down a couple of people this evening. Hopefully they'll be coming later. Maybe a few forgot the earlier start time. But without further, and there's one of them. Good evening, Councilor Danberg. We're going to start off, Chair Kelly, with the Land Use Committee report, please.
Actually, Vice Chair Lucas, who was here for it, was going to give the report for tonight.
Very good. Thank you, Chair Kelly. Vice Chair Lucas.
Yes, there's no report.
That's a heck of a job, Councilor Lucas. Thank you so much for that work.
See what a good mentor I am?
I assure you, Councilor Kelly, your job's not in danger whatsoever. All right. And next, Zoning and Planning Committee, Vice Chair Oliver is going to give the report, please.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. And following up my distinguished colleague in the ZAP committee, although there were multiple items taken up, there is no report this evening. I do, however, have two public hearings to schedule.
Please go ahead and assign the public hearings.
Great, thank you. I have two public hearings to schedule. This is, sorry, I lost my notes here. I'm bombing, sorry, Councilor Lucas. Items 311-24, requesting discussion and possible amendments to dormer regulations in Chapter 30 zoning. And item 317-24, requesting discussion and possible amendments to Section 5.4.2. Both of these would be scheduled for November 14th.
Thank you very much. You have, the clerk is just reminding me that you have a couple.
On page 236 of the docket. Wow. Councilor Lucas did so much better, sorry. On
Don't
page
worry, we're not going to fire you yet.
236
Go ahead, please. Page 236
Yep,
of
going there.
385-24 needs a public hearing assigned.
385-24, requesting amendment to section 9.1, of course, yep, of chapter 30 of our zoning code. And nope, not that one.
That's it.
Yep, that is it.
All right.
So I have three public hearings to schedule. Terribly sorry.
Thank you, Vice Chair Oliver. Councilor Krinsman is not here for programs and services. Oh, he is. Whoops. All right. Councilor Krinsman, you're here just in the nick of time. Go ahead, please, for Programs and Services Committee. right, Counselor Krinsman, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President. Is it my time?
It's your time. You came in at just the right moment.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. There is no report this evening.
Another stellar performance. I'm really very
you.
impressed with our committee chairs and vice chairs.
but-
Next, I'm going to go to Public Safety and Transportation Committee, Chair Grossman.
Thank you, Mr. President. The report begins on page 229, and the committee met on October 9th. Our first two items were held. Item 380-24, the Police Chief Selection Committee by President Laredo, appointing Counselor Tariq Lucas as the council appointee, and Dr. Lauren Solitar as the City Council appointee, was approved, 6 in favor, 1 abstention. Item 381-24, the Police Chief Selection Committee by Her Honor the Mayor, appointing Carl O'Hara, Michelle Leung, Judge Nancy Holtz, Chief Kevin O'Connell, Derejbi Demisi, and Rabbi Keith Stern. Was approved 7-0. With that, I move the report.
Thank you, Chair Grossman. Next up, Public Facilities, Chair Albright, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. The committee met on October 9th, and we reviewed 101-24. Councilor Albright, on behalf of the Public Facilities Committee, requesting a discussion on private ways. That was voted no action necessary, 6-0. The next was held. After that, 354-24, Eversource Energy petitioning for grant of location to install and maintain 242 feet of conduit on Manhattan Street. That was approved, 5 in favor, none against. And 374-24, Eversource Energy petitioning for a grant of location to install and maintain one jointly owned pole on the north of Christina Street, approximately 248 feet west of Bernard Street, and that was also approved, 5 in favor, none against, 1 abstention.
And you have some public hearings to assign, Madam Chair.
Just a minute. Okay, yes, we do.
Page 238, 239, and 240.
Yep. So the first one is 396-24, request for grant of location on Center Street. This is National Grid requesting grant of location to install and maintain gas main in Center Street in a number of locations, which I won't go into, but can be found in our docket. That will be held Wednesday, October 23rd. The next one is 397-24, request for grant of location on Walnut Street. This is also National Grid. Petition for grant of location to install and maintain gas main in Walnut Street, also at a number of locations. This will be also heard on October 23rd. 398-24, again, National Grid. Petition for a grant of location to install and maintain gas main in Washington Street at a number of locations, some of which are abandoning locations. But again, all of the details of this are in our docket. And finally, also National Grid requesting a grant of location to install and maintain gas main in Canterbury Road, also at a number of locations, also to be heard on October 23rd. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Albright. I have Vice Chair Maliki for the Finance Committee, please.
Thank you. So the report begins on page 231. The committee met on October 15. First was number 157-24, request, skip that one. Number 337-24, the appointment of Christopher de Bonaventura to the Other Post-Employment Benefits Trust Fund, and that was approved 6-0. Number 366-24, appropriate and expend $14,350 for fire training. That was for enforcement and training and education of fire prevention officers. That was approved 6-0. Number 367-24, authorization to accept and expend a $50,000 grant from the FY25 Community Compact Grant Program. That was to develop a wage and classification plan. Oops, sorry, that was held. We have another one. Okay, this is also the Community Compact. Number 368-24, appropriation to accept and expend a $50,000 grant from for an economic development plan. That would be an update of our 2019 economic development plan, and that was approved 6-0. Number 370-24, authorization to accept and expend a $217,000 grant from Mass DOT's Shared Streets and Spaces program. That's for the Blue Bikes bike share operations, and that was approved 6-0. And finally, number 371-24, authorization to accept and expend a $585,989.09 grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and that's for the purchase of AEDs, training and fitness and wellness classes for the fire department, and that was approved 6-0.
Thank you, Vice Chair Maliki. Chair Danberg for real property reuse.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight, there is no report.
Thank you, Chair Danberg. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll on our first call in the docket, please?
Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
Aye.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs. Counselor Farrell.
Aye.
Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
Aye.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
Aye.
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
Aye.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye, with the exception of 380-24, for which I'm recused.
Counselor Maliki.
Aye.
Counselor Mickley.
Aye.
Counselor Oliver.
Aye.
Counselor Wright.
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion carries 23 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, with the exception of docket item 380-24, with 22 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, 1 recusal.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'd like to entertain a motion to invite the mayor inside the rail to give her presentation. Councilor Kelly has moved it. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilor Albright. We'll do this in a voice vote. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Maliki, will you escort the mayor into the chamber along with Councilors Lipoff and Kelly, please?
Good evening, everybody. How we doing? Nice to see everybody in the audience, but I'm sorry I'm going to muck up your evening a little bit more because I'm in between first and second call. I apologize ahead of time. President Laredo and Vice President David Kalis, our President Emeritus Baker, all our residents here and at home, to our city councilors, Good evening. So, if Josh Morse, our Commissioner of Public Buildings, Jim McGonigal, our Commissioner of Public Works, and Nicole Banks, our Commissioner of Parks, Rec, and Culture, and their teams seem a bit breathless, there's a good reason. The amount of capital infrastructure work we have accomplished in the last 7 years, the amount that's underway right now, and the plans for the next 5 years can take your breath away. Since January 2018, when I became mayor, our team, with the support of all of you, our honorable city council, have invested more than $423 million in just the buildings and grounds projects throughout Newton, notably of which more than $90 million came from state and federal governments and utility companies. We work really hard to find grants and leverage our funding. Josh Morse, who knows our buildings inside and out and the dates that they were constructed, he doesn't think it's purely speculative to suggest that we have invested and are investing more in infrastructure over these past 7 years than any 7-year period in the history of Newton. Newtonians are already happily using the new building for our preschool, the Newton Early Childhood Program, and the addition over at the Oak Hill Middle School. They're using and enjoying the 2 new Gath pools and the splash pad, and the 3 sets of field lights and 3 new synthetic turf fields at our high schools. We are well underway with 4, count them 4, fabulous school projects at Lincoln Elliott, Horace Mann, Countryside, and Franklin Elementary Schools. I hope you've driven Walnut Street recently. The framing of the Cooper Center for Active Living is almost done, and the vision and feasibility study for the Comprehensive Police Facility Improvement Project is well underway. Furthermore, in addition to operating investments of $9.5 million annually in our roads and sidewalks, we directed an additional $17 million of American Rescue Plan Act funds to improve roads, calm traffic, repair sidewalks, and make bicycling safer. That's more than $80 million of road and sidewalk work. And by the way, I know there's still much more to be done. I acknowledge that. Here we are in October 2024 in the very final stages of our American Rescue Plan Act investments. And we directed close to $40 million of these funds into permanent improvements in our infrastructure. Altogether, over $22 million of ARPA investments went to our schools, the Newton Public Schools, and a bunch of that had significant positive impacts on a wide variety of school infrastructure. We put ARPA funds to work at every single school building with capital improvements, ventilation systems. We put technology across all grades, all schools, the athletic fields and the lighting, playgrounds, and a slew of maintenance projects. I mentioned the $17 million in ARPA that went towards roads and sidewalks for condition, safety, and accessibility. We invested more than $5 million in the libraries, children's room, the Cooper Center, police headquarters, and more. And another $5 million improved our athletic fields, parks, gardens, trails, and courts. So in the coming 5 years, we have a whole array of great investments planned. You'll find in the capital improvement plan, which, by the way, city councilors, there's a hard copy for each of you as you walk out. Thank you, Perry and Trevor. You will see in that, in the coming 5 years, things from a Christina Street shared use bridge near the end of Needham Street in Upper Falls, a Spears Garden, community garden in Nonantum, an Oak Hill Park playground improvements in Ward 8, Captain Ryan's Park improvements in West Newton, a new 450-seat auditorium at the Lincoln Elliott School, and this will really be our first true community and school shared performance venue. We've got improvements to the Crystal Lake Beach in Newton Center, a new fire ladder, number 3 for all our safety, and more. Here's an interesting one. Importantly, 30% of the projected capital project spending in the CIP over the next 5 years is actually to improve water, sewer, and stormwater systems. We finish up the water meter replacements, we upgrade the sewer pump stations, we tend to the critical covered water storage facility on Wobbin Hill. This one you got to pay attention to. We are more at the beginning on this. We are getting underway on the massive amount of work ahead of us in our storm system, which is mandated by the feds to implement an EPA-required phosphorus control plan to protect the Charles River. And also related to stormwater, we're doing even more to protect ourselves from flooding. With the help of Maureen Lemieux, our CFO, with Jonathan Yo, our COO, and votes by all of you, the City Council, I've used the city's annual budget and occasionally other funding sources to pay the debt service for the bonding of our capital infrastructure. This includes really big projects, such as the $54.9 million in investments in the new Lincoln Elliott Elementary School. With careful budgeting and planning, we do have the funds available for all our current work and the funded projects in the CIP that you received tonight, all while we are keeping our annual debt service payments just where we want them to be, but in that range of 5 to 5.5% of our annual budget. Please keep in mind that for future really big projects, we will need override funding. Otherwise, our annual debt service payments would grow to an uncomfortable place, crowding out other operating budgets and operating services that we provide. Newtonians stepped up for override funding for major projects in the past. The new Ainger, Zervis, Cabot, Countryside, and Franklin Elementary Schools, and fire headquarters in Station 3 as examples. Upcoming projects such as the police headquarters facility renovations and additional elementary schools such as Ward Underwood will also need such funding by Newton voters. And you know what? By all of us working together, we will make these investments in Newton's future when the time comes. In closing, with Halloween approaching, it's apt to point out that infrastructure is the, wait for it, skeleton There you go. Yeah. Upon which all our work is done. Teachers can teach better and students can learn better in up-to-date school buildings. Our climate is better served by energy-efficient buildings that are fossil fuel-free. Residents who are walking, biking, or driving are safer and bounced around far less in well-designed, well-constructed, and well-maintained roads and sidewalks. Athletes of all ages will have their soccer ball go where it's intended if the turf, grass or synthetic, is in good shape, and will have more hours to play with good lighting. Reinvesting in technology lets us do our homework or our city and school work more effectively and efficiently. So this capital improvement plan is all treat, no tricks. Happy Halloween, everybody. Thank you. With that, Mr. President, is it okay if I introduce Jonathan Yo, our Chief Operating Officer?
Of course, Madam Mayor, we'd be happy to have Mr. Yo make a presentation.
And okay, if I sit
I'm
there?
going to join you over
Okay.
there.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jonathan Yo. I'm the Chief Operating Officer, and I think this is my 7th capital improvement plan. It's an honor to be in front of this great council and the residents and staff of the city who are watching. I'm going to get started here with just a couple facts, and then it's mostly pictures, okay? So nothing too scary. I don't have any big surprises at all. Our capital improvement plan really is 619 different projects now, new and continuing projects using a variety of sources. Total investment of nearly $1.5 billion, of which over $400 million is currently funded in the CIP. We did add 290 new projects this year, and I'll get to that in just a minute. Mostly that's the result of Commissioner Josh Morse doing a full and complete evaluation of all of our municipal buildings and making sure that projects and needs for those buildings in future years were well documented and put into the capital improvement plan. Funding sources for the CIP, as the mayor mentioned, city bonding clearly is one key one, but we have many other sources to use, including state grants, the CPA, there's one coming up for a non-city asset, water, sewer, and stormwater funds, and other funding sources, including ARPA and free cash and one-time funding sources. As the mayor mentioned, debt exclusion overrides may also be needed in the future, especially for larger projects. The big five, I will just show these pictures to you. This is our five biggest projects in the works right now. $264 million over the next 5 years. Countryside, Horace Mann, Lincoln Elliott, the Cooper Center, and Franklin School. Many of you are involved in those projects as counselors. Two major projects under construction. Just show you some quick photos here. Cooper Center, here's a drone photo above Cooper Center a few weeks ago, under construction there, and then a picture I took just a couple days ago at the intersection with Highland, and it is, as the mayor said, framing out very quickly. The Lincoln Elliott School, many of you may not have been up there recently, but this project on Jackson Road is moving quickly along, and construction is on pace for students to move in there next fall of 2025. The current Lincoln Elliott School will then be used as swing space for the Horace Mann School as we begin that project. I do note on many of these whether projects are funded by ARPA down in the bottom left corner. Some are partially funded using ARPA, some are fully funded using ARPA. You'll see that. Gaff Pool, this was a major accomplishment completed this year. It'd be good for all of you to know that we had a very successful pool season. Memberships went significantly up, as did daily pass admissions. So many people were using this great asset of the city, and we expect it to grow even further in the future. Many funding sources were used for this. Here's the ribbon cutting. Many of you were there. This is Livingston Cove. We'll stay with Parks and Rec for right now. These are the accessible paths and the fishing pier and all the protection we made at Crystal Lake. There's some photos of kids using the fishing pier. Many of you have seen them out doing this, and many people enjoying this section of our wonderful gem, Crystal Lake. Some of you have been down to Auburndale to see the new Marty Sender Phase 2, the new Riverwalk, which has a boardwalk segment through the wetlands, approved by the Conservation Commission, of course. And this is a wonderful new trail. I recommend this trail from Lions Field all the way into Auburndale Cove Park. We've also been using some ARPA funds for smaller projects. Jennifer Steele has been completing some conservation area trail improvements. This is a trail over at Norumbega Conservation Area. She's also been working in Kessler Woods and Kennard Park, the Upper Falls Greenway. We're making some improvements to go for the Greenway to move into the new splash park that's being built by Northland this coming winter, spring. Also, there were some improvements at the Deer Park. And again, these are partially ARPA funded. Another great project finished this year was the new accessible bridge over the Cheesecake Brook at Albemarle. And this really opens up the other side of the southbound side of Albemarle for parking for those coming to the expanded Gath Pool Complex, as well as the fields that we'll be renovating there at Albemarle. And it's a great venue for kids to get over to Day Middle School as well. Newton North, here's a bunch of you here. This was our ribbon cutting at the new Newton North Stadium field replacement that is successful. Here was a game a couple nights ago. I took a picture of a soccer match under the lights. This is exactly what we needed this field to happen. We also needed to create and finish a bunch of drainage work underneath this field to make it last for a good long time. So we did not, it was a close call in terms of games, but we needed to get that drainage work done, and it was money well spent. Sort of a blurry picture, but these are the new field lights up at Forte Park in Nonantum that are came from mitigation funds from the development next door. Another park project completed this year was the new sensory dome at the Wellington Park up in Ward 3. We've also been doing a lot of resurfacing of tennis courts, some using ARPA funds, some using donated funds, and operating funds, courts at Newton South, Highlands, Braceland, to get these courts in great shape. Tennis is still is an important recreational venue, even though pickleball is trying to take over. Tennis is still very important in this city. You can guess I'm a tennis player or not. Farlow Park, we used some ARPA funds and some state grant money to complete some great improvements to the pond and the fountain there at Farlow Park in Newton Corner, and also to fix the gazebo. This is in the picture, I believe, Mrs. Goldstone. She is, I don't know if any of you know her, but she loves this park, and this is a picture taken by her son, sent to us, of the gazebo that's been fixed up. Other important parks project completed was working with Newton Public Schools to complete playground enhancements at the Williams Elementary School to provide more stimulating and inclusive play opportunities for students. This included accessible swings, accessible picnic tables, and pathways. Burr School Athletic Fields Project. This is the first of 3 large grass athletic field projects now about to be underway. This one is first out of the gate, and as you can see in the photo on the left, there's a lot of earth already moving around in Auburndale at this location, and this is going to end up being a great expansion of grass athletic fields and creation of an accessible path with new trees and amenities. And then the second project, which is going out to bid this week, is the Albemarle Fields project. This includes new lights and 6 pickleball courts and redone baseball and softball fields, the new synthetic turf field for Newton North and the community, as well as a pedestrian path and amenities. So this is mostly CPA funded, but also partially ARPA funded. And staying with Parks and Rec, I'll just mention every year our street tree program from Urban Forestry. We have a 5-year street tree planting plan. As you can see in the map on the right, over the last 5 years in green, the team led by Mark Welsh has focused on the areas of the city that had the lowest, had heat island issues as well as low tree canopy. And those are areas in the northern part of the city above the Pike. And as you can see, we focused on those areas the last 5-6 years, and we'll be continuing this year and then branching out into some other areas of the city that need street trees that we've identified through an analysis. And this program has been partially ARPA funded as well. The fire department, so switching out of Parks and Rec to the fire department. This is an image I happened upon a fire up in Ward 3, and there's ladder 3 right there, old ladder 3. This is one of the key things that we'll be replacing as part of our capital improvement plan. Ladder 3 is getting to its age for replacement. Engine 7 will be coming to us next year. You all have approved that already, as well as the emergency response unit. So we're making sure we keep the fire department's equipment up to date, as well as their personnel gear as well. IT, not always making it have photos into the CIP, but this year we did get a picture of IT, and possibly, Mayor, this is a few years ago, but we'll say it's a recent photo. And this is, we are going to be replacing phone systems at both high schools, making some critical server replacements. And also, I think, as you all know, our IT department is really watching out for security for all of us, for the city, for those of us who work in the city and represent the city. Sustainability, as the mayor mentioned, we've been very focused on sustainability projects, everything from our Phase 3 solar program. We will be seeing several new roof and canopy solar installations over the next year. Geothermal, we are going to be pursuing and using geothermal for HVAC use at both Countryside and Franklin. And as you can see, a picture of some drilling operations there at the Franklin School. They were exploring the conditions underground for the geothermal network. This is a great, exciting program that's really been made possible through federal changes in tax laws. We'll be converting the library. You all have approved our conversion of the library HVAC over to all electric. And then, as the mayor mentioned, all new electric schools, new schools, the Cooper Center, and also our entire fleet of passenger vehicles, or EV. We're also working with the Newton Housing Authority to bring sustainability into affordable housing, which is not an area that generally people focus on, but the state, the feds, and the city are trying to make sure we don't leave affordable housing behind in terms of sustainability. We're going to be funding using ARPA funds and state funds a really great project at the Horace Mann campus up on Watertown Street to convert buildings, improve efficiency, and leverage some mass save funds. This is something coming up and is going out to bid shortly. Another important sustainability project is the conversion of our remaining gas street lamps to solar. We have 70 remaining gas street lamps that not only burn fossil fuel, costing us money and headaches, that create service issues. We've worked with a contractor, manufacturer to create an attractive lamp that can replace the gas lamps. And this is very much in keeping with our climate action plan. Boston did this recently. They've converted, they're converting all of their gas lamps, including up on historic Beacon Hill, successfully. So we're looking forward to doing this next year using ARPA funds. Now, staying with DPW, they've completed paving and accessibility and installation of chargers at the Pearl Street Municipal Parking Lot. in Newton Corner, which those of you who've used it is a very valuable parking lot in that village center. We've also completed paving improvements at the police headquarters. Many of you were with us in our tours of that complex earlier this year and saw the conditions of the parking lot. That has now been fixed, and also the security fence work will be going up and starting the coming weeks. We're also making improvements to equipment and dispatch. We've completed some HVAC work and other projects. And then longer term, as the mayor mentioned, we're looking at a major police facilities project. In the meantime, we're going to use $300,000 in ARPA funds to make some immediate improvements to the conditions. Oh, there you can see, recognize many of you right there, and listening to Chief McMains there in the basement of police headquarters. This is the area we're planning on making a bunch of improvements to locker rooms, areas that are heavily used by the police officers and staff. Another smaller project we're undertaking across the street here at the Newton Free Library, we're making repairs to the plaza, 32-year-old plaza that's seen a lot of feet over and snow plowing over the years, and we're making repairs there. We did complete dredging out here at City Hall Ponds. This is the beauty pic from a few days ago there, before the leaves came off, of the ponds, which will enhance our ability to store more water during large rain events and move the water from past the library and into Bullis Pond. Staying with DPW, we're going to talk about road paving. Here's the 2024 map of projects. There are 15 major projects underway, million paving and cold in place kind of work, and then dozens of residential streets happening. Over the last 7 years, over 80 miles of street have now been completed. I think it's interesting, many of you should know that we'll be updating the PCI listing this winter. I think the vehicle is out there analyzing our streets right now. So we'll have a new PCI listing that we'll be able to use to prioritize work going forward, obviously focusing on the worst streets. And we have been using ARPA funds to help accelerate this program. We've made sure that during the downturn of COVID, and there was 1 year we had to reduce in spending, we made sure we made that up using ARPA funds, and then we've accelerated the accelerated road repair program to really go after especially residential streets. There are major streets underway. Here's Waltham Street. I think the mayor mentioned this. This has recently been done. In terms of major streets, Austin Street, I think Valentine Street was closed today. So Valentine Street is underway. Auburndale Ave, in Hammond Street, Waltham Street, Albemarle, a bunch of major streets are all being paved this year. Dozens of smaller streets. Here's a good example, Arnold Road in Meadowbrook, and this is down in Ward 8. I think Arnold Road was the worst road in town until recently, and here's some images, including a bump out that was added to this intersection for safety reasons, again, partially ARPA funded. We're also making sure we're addressing pedestrian infrastructure and sidewalks. We have a whole analysis program we use to identify sidewalks in need of repair. And this year we've been focusing on Williams and Ward School areas, and next year Bowen and Underwood schools are a focus. Where's Maria? There we go. So, and we will be using $200,000 in free cash for even further traffic calming work in parts of the city as requested. We've been able to do over 41 miles of sidewalk over the last 6 years and over 700 accessible ramps. The traffic calming program also is a very analytical program based on data and analysis. DPW Transportation conducting this analysis every year and prioritizing segments. Many ongoing projects that you all have approved or will be coming to you soon for approval. And here's a map of the 2024 scoring map of over 220 segments of road in the city. Some projects that were recently done are the ComAv Greenway, which is really 6 miles now of wonderful walking, biking, and rolling, because you can now go two-way on the carriageway. Many of us did it for years, I guess illegally, but now it's completely legal and nicely signed so that everyone can enjoy this real linear park that we have, which is a great asset. One thing evidently the state tried to do years ago was to get rid of the carriageway. And so they started in the west and they took out the carriageway in Auburndale. We are now finally restoring that with the help of the state. The state has it now under construction. We all designed it. The city council approved the design of this new carriageway, restoration of the carriageway in Auburndale right next to Lions Field and connecting up with the Marty Sender Trail. So this is now under construction. It's already starting to look nicer out there. There'll be a bunch of pedestrian improvements there as well. Another DPW project was the Upper Falls Village Center improvements at Petty Square. And this, here's a drone footage, and I think that's a bus making a turn through the new intersection there. And it's really created some really nice business-friendly zones for pedestrians and business out in this critical intersection of the city, and better parking and sidewalk access as well. This will connect up to the new splash park that Northland is building. We're also in design using ARPA funds of the Newton Highlands Village Enhancement Project. As all of you know, this is really designed to create a real thriving business and community space and provide for better accessibility and safety and beautification, stormwater work. There's an upcoming meeting over at the library in November on this project. This is fully ARPA funded. We will need state grant funds to make this a reality. Another major project is out to bid right now, is the Washington Street pilot. We will be doing substantial traffic and parking monitoring, data and evaluation as the City Council had desired, and that construction is planned in 2025. And as you know, adjustments will be easy to make, and we'll be communicating back and having continued public and council involvement going forward. That's all been funded through ARPA. The water meter replacement program, as the mayor mentioned, is well down the road, nearly 80% complete. $16 million program. This is an incredibly important project to get done. I encourage all of you to sign up for the new online customer portal and dashboard. It's very easy to do, a few clicks. Here's my account. Here's the last 30 days of water use in my house. I'm trying to figure out exactly what happened on Saturday, October 5th. I think one of my sons may have come back, and I don't know what happened, but there was a lot of water being used on that day. But anyways, this is a very important thing. You can set alerts and make sure that you don't have a big leak going on or there's no strange use of water, but because it is expensive these days, as we all know. So this, I do encourage all of you to sign up. This was an important part of the project. We're also continuing to make water main improvements throughout the city, $5 million a year. We'll be doing 33 different streets over the next 5 years. And we also just completed, as you probably read in the mayor's update, a new system-wide lead and copper inventory as required by the EPA. That analysis, and you can click on every single house in the city now on the website you can get to through DPW utilities, is you can see the status of every line going into every home in the city. The great news is that we have almost no lead in this city. We do have a little bit of work that needs to get done, and there will be a whole public process to make that happen, but we're in much better shape than many cities and towns in Massachusetts and in the country. We also have 2 new important water system improvement projects. Continuing the inflow projects on the sewer side that are key to keeping down our MWRA sewer bills. We're also doing repair work at our pump stations, including the Quinn pump station, which is a valuable asset. All right, credit to Councilor Maliki. I was looking for a good Border Street flooding video, and she has one, of course, and this was a great image. We will be addressing flooding in CIP projects. We will be undertaking a hydrologic analysis of Cheesecake Brook, which is incredibly important as we evaluate the water flow in this sub-watershed, both upstream of, in Border Street, but also downstream of the Border Street area, to make sure we're doing projects that make sense. We'll also be updating the 2015 Stormwater Infrastructure Improvement Plan, Mayor, if you can believe that, I know you and Deb worked on over the years, but that is something, there's been a lot of changes since then. We've had flooding since then, so we need to continue the work on that. We're making, improving drainage at Union Street, I should call it, not Union Square, Union Street in Newton Center. This area does not have great drainage structures, or almost no drainage structures, so we're doing that. After that is currently out to bid right now. Another big thing, as the mayor mentioned, is phosphorus control as required by the EPA to protect the Charles River. We'll be undertaking a series of projects. Here is one to note. This is a project in Newton Center Playground between two different ball fields. So there's quite a bit of cooperation now underway between DPW and Parks and Rec and Culture as we move forward with these important programs. We'll also obviously be restoring fields that are used as we build things underground. We'll be restoring fields to better conditions. I will provide right now just a quick update on ARPA because we're getting towards an important deadline with ARPA. December 31st is when all ARPA projects need to be under contract under the federal rules. We still have 2 additional years to spend, but I think it's important just to note right now where we are. We have 60 projects. I'm looking at Perry and Trevor since they're the ones who assist in tracking all of this. We've over 100 sub-projects that we're tracking included within those 60. We have 8 different categories, and we are allowed to make some changes even after December 31st, according to the federal rules. So these are some of the breakdowns. You can slice and dice projects in different ways. This is the original categories, the original 8 categories we had. You can do it differently. You can really look at how much money we've spent on students and schools, and it is a substantially larger share of the pie than we had originally laid out. Quickly, I'll just go through a couple slides. They have some pictures associated with what we've done. Much of this is all online and was also in the long-range financial report that Maureen presented. But these are some of the critical projects, students and schools. We really funded the MPS operating budget during the critical years coming out of COVID to make sure they got the increases they needed over at least 3.5% a year. We got Horace Mann started. We did a playground at Horace Mann. We did field lights, an elementary reading, $2 million elementary reading program, curriculum, and maintenance work. The next category was COVID response. This was over $10 million worth of work. This is everything you can imagine, from testing to the building ventilation work that we did in multiple departments, recognition of city and MPS staff going forward, and other types of COVID expenses. Housing and Human Services, we're spending over $8 million to provide economic stability and mobility to different families, and we made sure we got money during COVID for emergency housing relief to prevent evictions, and doing other work, including helping the Haywood House project over in Nonantum. Roads and traffic calming. I think in a narrow sense, we've spending over $13 million. If you include the village center work, it's over $17 million. And this has been really to accelerate our accelerated road repair program. Includes quite a bit of traffic calming work and the creation of our bicycle pedestrian. I think it's the walk, ride, and roll plan that you'll be hearing more about in the coming months. Parks, Rec, and Culture, many different smaller projects, everything from helping fund Gath Pool and the new synthetic turf field at Albemarle, tennis court work and trails work, Captain Ryan's Park, so many different smaller parks and rec projects. A key thing we used ARPA funds for it was to sustain our municipal finances coming out of COVID. During a 3-year time period, we invested over $9.6 million to stabilize the city, and we deliberately tapered down the use of those funds so we did not create a financial cliff when the funding ended, as many cities and towns have not done. And funds have been used to maintain that public school increases in their budget. Critical infrastructure, second to final category, over $5 million worth of work. Children's room, library expansion, the Cooper Center, that Cheesecake Brook Bridge, and painting the old hut and other improvements. Economic recovery and village center, last category, nearly $5 million used to help the creative arts community coming out of COVID, helping our restaurants, providing for design work on the Newton Highlands, and then funding construction at Petty Square and the Washington Street pilot. So beyond our projects, there's a lot of other work going on in this city by the state. The state is doing many different projects. So this is a crude map of our city with where state projects are located. They are spending hundreds of millions of dollars in the city and in different locations everywhere from DCR on Hammond Brook Parkway to the state at Needham Street, the MBTA work, hopefully a big project with the commuter rail station improvements, at least in Newtonville, and then other improvements in the MBTA D-branch system as well. So these are big projects. These take a lot of time for city staff and city departments and working with our state reps to make these things happen and stay on track. And many of you hear about these and they impact our residents. Just want to thank with a gratitude to everybody involved. It's not just our steering committee of Josh, Nicole, and Jim, and Shauna, with the help of the mayor, obviously, and Maureen Lemieux, to make the CIP come together through a lot of analysis of projects. Our financial team, Perry and Trevor, putting this all together. And then lots of work by city departmental staff, and then support from departments like purchasing and law and the financial comptroller's office. Can't forget them. And then, of course, the city council for all of your review and oversight and approvals and recommendations. Our state reps for helping us with earmarks. And then the many, many boards and commissions. I don't think people realize just how many people are involved in capital projects here in the city. Everything from the CPC to the Design Review Committee. It's just amazing how many people volunteer their time to help move the city forward on these projects. And that includes people on working groups as well, our stakeholder groups, many different groups involved in pushing us on various fronts and making sure things happen and staying involved. And then, of course, the residents, many residents attending public meetings, writing emails, and staying involved. Plus, obviously, the design professionals and their work. So a lot of gratitude to everyone to make all of this happen. I will try to end with this last. Okay, here we go. I don't know if you were there to see this, but no sound, but there was some screaming involved. All right, note down below, I see a commissioner and a mayor in the back there, completely soaked and wet. So that was a great experience, and it's being well-used city asset. And we have another one on the way. So on that, I'll stop right there. Thank you all. And obviously, if you have questions, please let us know. And then outside is your small book. And if you have any questions on this, please let us know. And then, again, we'll be talking about this again in the spring. So thank you all. Take care.
Thank you, Madam Mayor Fuller. Mr. Yo, would the escort committee please escort the mayor out of the chamber, please? We're going to take a 2-minute recess then, and we're going to finish up our business this evening. That is first, and then we're going to do the CPA one. Colleagues, if you could take your seats, please. Colleagues? Colleagues, we have 2 items on second call this evening. The first is 300-24. It is 120, 126 Norwood Avenue. This item has been postponed several times because we did not have a full complement of counselors. I think with the exception of 1 or 2, we have a full one this evening. And the second item is the CPC item that we sent back to the CPC. We're going to hear it again tonight. So I'm going to start with Chair Kelly for the Land Use Committee. If you could just provide us a very quick overview of what this project is about, and then we'll have whatever discussion there is, and we'll hopefully vote. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will be very brief because we've all been hearing about this numerous times. This is a project that's already built over on Norwood Ave in Newtonville, Ward 2. When it was approved, they asked for a reduction in the amount of parking that would normally be provided. Now that it's built, they realized that they would really prefer to have those 2 extra spaces back for on-site parking. Many neighbors have weighed in on both sides of it, and it is back before us to vote on now on whether we will allow these 2 extra parking spots on site.
Thank you, Chair Kelly. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on this project? Councilor Block.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. President. I I participated in the discussion of this matter in land use. Just one slight modification about the backdrop. As far as I recall, the petitioner did not request the reduction in the number of parking spaces. That resulted from the conversation in the previous city council discussion, and they agreed, as I understand it, somewhat reluctantly. And they now want to comply with our zoning requirements of 2 parking stalls per unit. I've visited this site. It's a beautiful site. The parking stalls that they are proposing to implement logically and easily fit into their landscaping plan. I think the petitioner has tried to sell the parcels, and there's been difficulty finding buyers because of this restriction. When we talked about this in committee, I thought of the quasi-judicial role that I and now we all get to play, and that is making determinations, not whether we would like people to drive less and walk more, but whether this will have an adverse effect on the community. And the strongest argument that I've heard is that 2 more cars will create more congestion and more pollution, and we want to have less of that. But if a family moves in and they are in need of a second car and don't acquire one, they're just going to use ride shares, which will result in possibly more congestion and more pollution. So I don't think that's a very thoughtful way to think about this. So I voted in favor of this in committee, and I'm going to be voting for this this evening.
Thank you, Councilor Block. Councilor Farrell, and then Councilor Lipoff, Maliki, Leary.
Thank you, Chair Lipoff. I spent a good bit of time visiting 120 Norwood property with the developer, Mr. Leary, and his attorney, Mr. Morris. I also have read the concerns of the neighbors on both sides. I'm going to vote in favor of this project because 1, it's well designed and well situated. 2, it is more than sufficient space to allow the 2 additional parking spaces and still maintain large open spaces. 3, the developers made strong efforts to speak with the neighbors and respond with a plan to create more buffers by adding trees in addition to appropriate fencing. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, I believe, as esteemed members of the Land Use Committee have often stated, if the original request had been for 2 spaces per unit, would Land Use have approved the request? I believe it would have. This is the only question before us tonight, and I hope you will agree to grant the special permit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. Councilor Lipoff.
I think I was chair of land use when we did this one. No committee is perfect. We try to get to yes. We try to figure out the best project in the end. And I think we got this one wrong. In the sense of trying to make everybody happy. And I think that the 2 spaces, if they were there before, would have been just fine. It's interesting, the neighborhood, as they batted this around in the past few weeks, there are some people that are adamant, but there's also a lot that understand that those 2 spaces will take 2 cars, whether they're visiting or otherwise, off of the street or some other location. The speakers before me made other points that I was going to make as well. I'll be voting for this.
Thank you, Councilor Lipoff. Councilor Maliki, then Councilor Leary, and Councilor Wright.
Thank you. I'm going to, as I said the last time this was discussed in this chamber, I will be voting against it. I think a couple of problems here. First of all, if this had come in as 2 spaces as part of the original package, as it were, it would have been part of the original discussion, which I recall being very contentious and everybody thinking it was too dense a project for the area. I am skeptical that adding 2 more spaces will actually take 2 cars off the street, because I suspect that however many parking spaces there are, you might get people with even 1 more car than spaces are provided for. I think it's important to give the public confidence that the land use process is, the original land use process is something that they can rely on, and that there won't be this sort of iterative coming back for second bites of the apple after attention has flagged to allegedly correct mistakes by the developer. And I did have a call from the developer. I'm not a fan of sort of non-public communications, and that's another problem I have with the process that's been happening recently, where he seems to have been trying to pick off one neighbor at a time. We don't know what those neighbors were being told, and it's not part of the public discussion. So I think, and also with regard to the so-called difficulty of selling the units with only 1 parking space, I think the solution is a lower price. And what we're doing is just, if we approve this change, we're just handing over a large sum of money to the developer, who could have been honest at the beginning and asked for what he wanted then, rather than coming a year or a year plus later and trying to get something that was not part of the original discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Malachy. Councilor Leary, and then Wright. I don't think we, and Mickley, and then I don't think we have anyone else. Oh, Oliver, excuse me. As we speak, we add more and more and more. Go ahead, Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to be consistent with my values and with my vote in the Land Use Committee. I will not be supporting this project. It's consistent with our policy of encouraging more multimodal transportation. Parking has a significant value. Fewer parking spaces actually make the housing more affordable. The majority of the neighbors that I spoke to did not want additional parking. They wanted us to stick with the project that was initially approved. So I think we should be consistent with our parking policies, and this is an area near Village Center, near bus and commuter rail, and it's walkable to the Village Center. More parking, more cars, more congestion, more traffic, more pollution. Those are some of the biggest complaints that we hear from people. So we need to be consistent with our values to give people options and not incentivizing parking. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Councilor Wright.
Thank you. I agree with Councilor Malachy and Councilor Leary. There's another project, the Bristol in Waban at 20 Kenmonth. They have 24 units, and I believe all, or if most, are 1 parking spot per. It's in Waban versus this is in Newtonville, which has a grocery store walking distance, a pharmacy, the high school, the middle school. They both have elementary schools. They've sold at the Bristol. They've sold all, I believe, or almost all. I've talked to the realtor. Yes, they had some troubles with their price, with the parking, but it did happen, and they had to lower the prices in order to make those sales. And it makes these units more attainable. Not everyone's going to come in with 2 cars, and I agree, if you build the parking, you're going to bring in more cars. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Mickley, Councilor Oliver, then I have Humphrey, Bixby, and Albright. Go ahead, Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is in Ward 2. I've heard from a number of residents on this issue. First, just the project itself. I think there's a good argument for or against having the additional parking. There's something to be said for the need for families with 2 cars. There's also something to be said for diversified housing supply. In this very project, we would have 2 units with 2 spots, 2 units with 1 spot. So that is offering different types of housing for different people. I think if this was brought to us for the first time, I would have had it pretty an easier time supporting it with 2 spots at all the units. The biggest challenge for me, Councilor Wright, Councilor Leary, and Councilor Malachy all alluded to this, is the question of consistency and what sort of precedent we're setting for how the special permit process works. And if there's an expectation that developers can come in, assuming goodwill on all parties, but even if there is an expectation set that there can be a 1-2 process where you can get permission to do one thing and 2 years later get permission to do another thing without any material changes in the environment or the world or material reason to make that change, that just puts us in a tricky position both with our leverage and oversight over these projects and a tricky position with credibility with residents who are engaged in this process throughout. We've heard from residents about this issue. We've received emails from residents about this issue. The only phone calls I've received, the only strongest points of concern were from people that are opposed to this with 2 spots and concerned about the integrity of the process more than anything else. And that's what's weighing on me tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mickley. Councilor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. I'll be incredibly brief. I believe that the comments just made by Councilors Mickley, Wright, and Leary are 100% bang on. I will be voting against this project or against this amendment. I don't believe anything changed in this project other than the original petitioner's intent and their sale price. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver. Next online, I have Councilor Humphrey, and then we're going to return back to the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think other councilors have covered the process concerns, so I'll just say that my quasi-judicial assessment is that this change would be deleterious for traffic congestion, and I don't see a need to vote in favor of changing from the original approved project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. I have Councilors Bixby, Albright, and Lucas, and I think that will do it for us. So go ahead, please, Councilor Bixby.
Thanks. I'll also keep it short, but I will be joining some of my recent colleagues who spoke and voting no for 2 simple reasons. I do think we have many families and individuals in Newton who live car-free and car-light and are doing just fine, and I think we need to, especially so close to village center schools, make sure that this project has consistency. Councilor Mickley said it very well, but we have neighbors with projects near them throughout the city, and to make sure that we are not changing the game on them is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bixby. Councilor Albright, then Councilor Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. So as I understand what happened, there was a contentious discussion about this project, and the neighbors were upset about all the cars and a new 4-unit project, I believe. And in a way to assuage the committee and try and make it easier to grease the skids, so to speak, the developer agreed to take out 2 of the parking spaces. So I think the original intention of this developer was to have all 2 spaces per unit. The important point that needs to be made is that this is a 4-bedroom unit. This is going to be a family with kids going off in different directions. And it's very hard, having grown up with a family with 2 kids, it's very hard to only have 1 car when you have kids going in opposite directions at the same time. The Bristol apartments have 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. So it's much easier to have only one car per unit if you don't have a 4-bedroom unit. So I think we must take that into account. I'm going to obviously support the request for the 2 parking spaces. I think that we need to really, back in the horse and buggy days, you needed to get places, so you had 2 horses and 2 buggies. Now we need 2 cars, and that's just what it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Albright. Councilor Lucas.
Thank you. I wasn't around during those horse and buggy days, so I don't know how folks got around.
I hope you're not implying that some of us were, Councilor Lucas.
Perhaps. No, thank you. But I am going to support the amendment just like how I did in land use. Just a couple of things that haven't been said about this project as a whole. As Councilor Albright said, these are bigger units. Each of these units is just under 3,000 square feet. It should not be compared to the project that Councilor Wright referenced in Waban, or even the Austin Street Trio, Riverside, Northland. Those are smaller units. That is where we need to impose parking waivers, because those are smaller units in the middle of a village center. This is just outside the village center in 3,000 square feet, 4-bedroom apartments. You're going to need multiple cars. That's one. Another thing I want to say is that the 2 new parking stalls will be permeable pavers and cobblestone. The 4 garage stalls that are already approved, already built, those are EV ready. I believe the 2 additional cars on site will not adversely affect the neighborhood. 2 cars will not do it. That came up during the original public hearing 2 years ago. And that is when the developer took away those 2 stalls. Because of the Cabot School morning drop-off traffic goes right by the driveway. 2 additional cars will not make a difference. The neighbors were split. We heard, or we read many letters that were opposed, and there was a petition of neighbors who signed it who were in favor. But one thing I do want to point out is that the closest abutter is in favor of the amendment. It's a good project. I voted for it back in 2022. I voted for the amendment in land use a couple months ago. Another thing about the project is why I like this project is that it's single family attached and it's 4 units. The lot coverage is only 17%. The by right option would have been a very, very large 2-family house with a minimum of 4 parking stalls. And that lot coverage would have been 30%. So this, by far and away, is a better project because it went through the special permit process. As Councilor Lipoff said, you're never going to find perfect, but let's not make perfect the enemy of good. I thought I had that one backwards. I'm all set. Thank you. I'm voting in favor.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Baker, I believe you have the last word this evening. Go ahead, please.
Well, I didn't go quite back to the horse and buggy days, but I've been around a while. But anyway, I appreciate it. The question I just want to be clear about, this comes to us with the recommendation of the committee, correct? To make this change?
That is correct. It was a 4-3 vote.
So the council vote, if you vote in favor, you're voting in favor of supporting the recommendation of the committee. Is that correct?
That's correct. Okay. If you're voting yes or aye, you're voting in favor of the request to have the 2 additional parking spaces.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. Anybody else wish to be heard on this item? All right, seeing none, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Farrell. And you have probably about a minute? You got about 1 minute left. Go ahead, please.
It won't take 1 minute, Chair, but thank you very much. Let me say to my colleagues who talked about the integrity of the process, we are all very concerned about the integrity of the process, but the process does have some variations in it. And the phrase that I used recently, which is used several times since I've been a member of the Land Use Committee, is that there is a question. When a project returns for another bite at the apple, the question becomes, would we have approved this the first time? And that question was asked in this one, and I think we would have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Farrell. Anybody else wish to be heard on this item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, you'll call the roll. Just to be clear, a yes or an aye vote means you're voting in, oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Gentile, forgive me, I didn't see you back there. Thank you, Councilor Getz.
I was a late entry. It's not your fault. I jumped in at the end. I guess I just want to say this. To me, if you are on the fence, this is like, to me, a common sense kind of a question. And it's just recognizing the the world that we live in, and just think about your own families. These are 4-bedroom units. To say that you have to get by with one car, that just doesn't seem real to me. So if you are possibly on the fence, think of your own family. How would you, with 2 or 3 or 4 kids, be able to get people to where they need to be in this day and age? I don't think it's fair to the people that want to move in there. They should have 2 cars. Somehow they're going to get a second car involved, and it's better if it's kept on their property as opposed to the street. And there's some pretty, if I understand it correctly, there's a lot of restrictions about parking on the street already. So anyway, please think of your own lives and your own families, and how would you like it having just one car? And to me, that's why I plan on supporting it. It's just being realistic.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I'm going to remind us, a yes or an aye vote means you're voting in favor of the request for additional parking spaces. A no vote means you're voting against it. And this requires 2/3, 16 votes in the affirmative to pass. So, Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Albright.
Aye.
Counselor Baker.
Aye.
Counselor Bixby.
No.
Counselor Block.
Aye.
Counselor Danberg.
Aye.
Counselor Downs. Counselor Farrell. Counselor Gentile.
Aye.
Counselor Getz.
Aye.
Counselor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman.
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey.
No.
Counselor Kalis.
Aye.
Counselor Kelly.
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman.
Aye.
Counselor Leary.
No.
Counselor Lipoff.
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz.
No.
Counselor Lucas.
Aye.
Counselor Maliki.
No.
Counselor Mickley.
No.
Counselor Oliver.
No.
Counselor Wright.
No.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Motion fails. 15 yeas, 8 nays, and 1 absent.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We move on to the final item for the evening, and that is the CPC item. Councilor Gentile, are you comfortable presenting this again briefly, or would you prefer, or Councilor Baker, would you prefer that I defer to those in the chamber?
I would defer to those in the chamber. I think the Vice Chair of Zoning and Planning is prepared to update the council.
Councilor Gentile, do you have a preference?
I'm not, if Council Maliki is okay with presenting, I'm fine. Otherwise, I'm not sure that, that I had asked her about presenting this. I knew she was prepared to do the report, but in fairness to her, it's whatever she wants to do.
Well, why don't we do this? Let's tee it off with Councilor Oliver first, and then we'll see if there's much of anything needed from the Finance Committee. Go ahead, please, Councilor Oliver, and recall, folks, that we had extensive discussion on this, so I really hope we focus our comments on what may be new or different since it went back to CPC, and then hopefully we'll take comments from folks and we'll vote. Go ahead, please, Councilor Oliver.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. So we're talking about item 334-24, CPC recommendation to appropriate $2 million in CPA funding. Both Finance and Zoning and Planning approved this item. Zoning and Planning approved it subject to second call. I do want to make sure that everyone has had a chance to look at the packet. We have a letter from CPC that has been revised twice. But the reason that Zoning and Planning had this subject to second call was because there was a lot of discussion about what would happen to the investment that's being made in the building, in the structure, should the building be sold. In that eventuality, what would happen to the investment, especially given that there was so much attention in the petition that was given to how the space was used by the community. And with that said, I don't think there's a need to go into any further detail unless people have any questions.
Thank you, Councilor Oliver. Councilor Maliki, do you want to add anything, or do you want me to defer to Councilor Gentile, or is it necessary for either of you to say anything? You need to turn on your mic, please.
Yeah, I think we had some of the same concerns in the Finance Committee, and I don't have the vote in front of me, but I know I abstained, and I think there were more.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. Councilor Gentile, is there anything else you need to add by way of report?
Well, let me just add that I attended the Community Preservation Committee, and quite frankly, the concerns I had about, what happens if the building gets sold, how clear are we being as to protecting what has been the history of community involvement and use of the space. And quite honestly, I was pretty pleased with what they came back with. And I think they addressed the issue of continuing the community use of the building if perhaps the building were to be sold. So I think that the language, and then there's like a side letter as to how they go about filling the space and how it goes up in some of the criteria so that everybody has the same criteria. I think they did a pretty good job of it, and I'm comfortable with what they came back with, and I plan on supporting it.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. All right, colleagues, anybody who wants to speak on the item? I know Councilor Baker does. Anyone else? Councilor Farrell, Albright, Getz. Hold on. I'm slow, folks. So I'm going to go with Farrell, Albright, Getz. I'll get to the rest of you later. Hold on. All right, Councilor Baker, you have the floor.
Okay, I just want to point out that procedurally, the matter is back before us directly from the CPC. And what they did was amend their recommendation to include the provisions relating to community access. So what the council is really voting on is whether to accept the amended recommendation of the CPC. We don't have the ability to modify it. All we can do is accept it or reject it. And it's again a 13-vote supermajority requirement because it's an appropriation. I'll just say as a matter of policy, I think they've been responsive to the concerns, but again, members of the council have to make that decision on their own. Thank you.
Councilor Baker, the clerk is going to check on whether this is a 2/3 or majority vote, but we can hold that for the moment.
I checked with the law department, Mr. President, because this is not a bonding matter. It is just a straight appropriation. And Mr. Lee, that was before the last meeting indicated that it was a 13-vote supermajority, not supermajority, but absolute majority. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Councilor Baker, are you saying it's a 13-vote majority or a 16-vote supermajority?
No, 13 votes.
That was the clerk and my understanding as well. So a little bit of confusion there. All right, so colleagues, just so we're clear, you need 13 votes to pass this. Okay. Councilor Baker, you all set?
I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is why we have a president emeritus to advise us on these things. Councilor Farrell, then Albright, then Getz, and I'll get to everyone else.
Thank you, Mr. President. As I have expressed several times, I'm concerned about the fundraising strategy for the First Baptist Church project. However, I believe that its success is very important as a historical property, a valued community resource, and an integral component of the Newton Village Center. Therefore, while I cannot vote aye, I will not vote no. I will step outside the railing.
Thank you, Counselor Farrell. Counselor Albright, then Getz, and then we'll get to the other folks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm very pleased with what the CPC committee has sent back to us. One of the people who wrote to us asked for some information about, should we be giving public money to a church? And so I thought it was fair just to summarize some of the items that were from the 2023 Commonwealth article just on that very topic. So I will just say a few sentences out of there. So the problem in Massachusetts is the Anti-Aid Amendment, which dates back to the 1800s, where we shouldn't, the idea was not to give public money to support the church. In 2018, the CPC in Acton was debating whether to give money to a church in Acton, and because it would fund some religious stained glass pictures, they had agreed to fund them, but it went all the way up to the Supreme Judicial Court, who ruled that as long as the funds that are going to the churches are not supporting religious aims and religious artifacts, then it is legal under the rules of the Supreme Judicial Court. So several projects have been funded since then, and I just wanted to finish by saying that Boston in 2023 spent $10 million of historic preservation projects. 15 of them were for religious structures of varying denominations. So Boston, it's good enough for Boston, and we're certainly legal given the rulings of the Supreme Judicial Court. And as I said in my last comments, some of our most important historic buildings in Newton are our religious institutions. So I hope that we will fund this project.
Thank you, Counselor Albright. So I have Counselor Getz next, then Danberg.
Okay, I actually am rising to ask a question because in reading through the CPC memo, in the use restriction number 2, and I'll just read it, it's the church will be required to record a deed restriction that requires subsequent owners of the property to comply with the community access provisions of the grant agreement until the 13th anniversary of the execution of the grant agreement. So you would add, whenever that grant agreement happens, my concern is that, and one would hope, and let me just, in rising, I am concerned that the grant agreement will be executed between the city and the party, the other party, the First Baptist Church of Newton. But then that clock starts ticking. So then in 13 years, that provision will not be provided for. That's my question.
So, Counselor Getz, you're asking through the president to the vice chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee the question you've just posed. Counselor Counselor Oliver, would you be able to respond to that question of Counselor Getz?
Yeah, the first thing I want to make sure, did I hear you say 13? Because the way I'm reading this, it's 30th, 30.
I want to be careful that we don't get into a back and forth debate, but
Yeah,
Counselor
sorry.
Getz, certainly you can rise and clarify your question.
Correct. I mean, is it 30th or 13th?
It says 30.
Okay.
Yeah, Counselor Getz, you need to use your microphone.
okay.
Counselor Oliver, you're all
so
set for
the
the
difference
moment.
is 13 and 30th. But what I'm concerned about is that one would hope, and let me just start from the onset, that I am fully supportive of the church, the tower restoration project and the appropriation from the CPC. But what I'm concerned about is, and one would hope that this church would be in ownership for decades, but there will then be a clock that starts ticking, so that then there will be no proviso once the property changes hands for any sort of requirement that a subsequent buyer would be required to have community access, if I'm interpreting this use restriction correctly.
Thank you, Counselor Getz. I'll remind everyone of Counselor Baker's reminder that we need to debate this on up or down. We're not going to modify the recommendation. So if that's something, Counselor Getz, that causes you not to support it, you have every right, and others do as well. Counselor Baker, did you want to comment on that? I think the hand is just up from the last time. All right, next we go to Counselor Danberg, then Mickley, then Leary, then Humphrey, then Kelly, and Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am very comfortable with the outcome of the past couple of weeks of discussion on this. It's my understanding that the issue of what would happen if the property is sold has been pretty much put to rest, because they have extended to 30 years, and I believe have said that if during that time or afterward, if the property were sold, they would the $2 million would have to be reimbursed to the city. So the city would not be out any funding at all. I hope, and we all hope, that this would not happen, and I don't think that it will happen. I think that this church and its support groups are strong. The church has some endowment. They are willing to spend that endowment to make sure that the church and the property is maintained. This is an iconic building in the city. It is it was until it was no longer able to be used because of the crumbling tower, used as the primary location for the New Philharmonic Orchestra. If any of you have gone to those concerts, which I have, and I know many of you have seen that many of the 600 seats in that building are filled. And this is the only location in the city that has 600 seats that are unobstructed with very good acoustics. The only other location or locations in the city that come anywhere near that do not have nearly the acoustics that this building has. We really want to be able to preserve this tower, because if you look at what can happen if the city does not step up to the plate, all we have to do is look to the Newtonville church tower that had the Normandy Tower that was taken down because the city would not step up to the plate. They could not get funding for it, so they took the tower down. And if you drive along the Pike on the corner of Walnut Street and the Pike, and you look toward toward Boston, there is a big church there with a flat top where the tower was taken down, and now it's filled with telecommunication equipment. It is the ugliest thing in this city, and we could be looking at that.
Counselor Danberg, you're out of time. Do you need more?
30 seconds.
Counselor Danberg's requested 30 more seconds. She was certainly on a roll. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Go ahead, please, Counselor Danberg.
Thank you. I will wrap up, but we certainly don't want to see that in Newton Center. We need to step up to the plate for our iconic buildings, and this is a very, very important building for all of Newton. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Danberg. Counselor Mickley, then Counselor Leary, then Counselor Humphrey, Kelly, and Lucas. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you. Counselor Danberg listed a lot of great reasons to support this project, and there are many great reasons. It's a beautiful building. I took a tour of it a few weeks ago with the Reverend Eden and my daughters, and I was amazed, blown away. It's one of the most amazing buildings I've seen, not just in Newton, but in Greater Boston. It's historic. We all know there's a lot of history to this building. There's a range of community groups. We have some great representation tonight, and the people behind this project, the architect, a Newton resident, Scott Aquilina, and again, the Reverend, Jana Eden, great leadership from the church. And the amendments, if you were to support this project, the amendments are really as much as we could imagine, right? The insurance of community use, the clawbacks, if it's not the phase funding based on matching other sources. There's obviously a lot to like about this project. I want to explain why I voted no in finance and my concerns. The first is the principle of whether we should be funding a project that is a religious institution. And Councilor Albright correctly pointed out that the state Supreme Court already ruled on this in 2018 with the Acton case, which allows us to fund these projects. But that's a different question of whether it's something we want to do. We're allowed to, but it's still a question of whether we want to support it and support city, state, city government funding for religious institutions. And if we do, to what extent? Earlier this year, I supported a $125,000 CPA grant for the Second Church in West Newton. I had no problem supporting that. That seemed 100% reasonable. This is over 15 times that amount. People talk about the president with Grace Church and say, we've done this before. To me, that's actually a concern, this pattern of how many of these are we going to do, not because I have an issue with this, but because there's an opportunity cost for everything we fund. We don't fund something else. Grace Church was 1.43 million. This is 2 million. And the question I'm really asking myself is how many more of these will we fund and at what expense? How many historic churches do we have in Newton and what else are we not going to fund because of that? We've achieved our historic preservation targets over the lifetime of the CPA program, around 18%. Open space is at 16%. Well, the target's 20%, but the required amount is 10%. So we've achieved that amount. For sure, we could do more, but there's other areas too. And when we look at the trade-offs, there's explicit versus implicit trade-offs. There's no trade-off right in front of us right now, but a few of the projects that the CPA has funded over the past few years, the West Newton Armory Affordable Housing Project, Webster Woods, Gath Pool Affordable Housing Trust, Burr Athletic Field, Albemarle Fields, Livingston Cove, and that's what I'm thinking about, the trade-offs. So in short, I love this building. I think it's a beautiful building. It has meaning, it has significance. I hope the building finds a way to move forward. I anticipate I will be maybe an only vote against the project tonight, not because I don't support the project, but just because I think that in terms of prioritization of what I hear residents want us to do with city funding, it goes back to a lot of those other things that I described before, and I do think we need to set some limits on how much city funding we put towards religious institutions. So I wish this project success. I hope it does well. I hope the community does well. And I expect it to pass today. But I do think we should be asking ourselves going forward, what is our strategy?
Councilor Mickley, you're out of time. Do you want another 30 seconds?
Another 30 seconds would be great.
All in favor, another 30 seconds for Councilor Mickley, please say aye. Aye. Go ahead, please.
We should ask ourselves, what is our strategy going forward for the potential more projects like this that will come to us, that will be good projects, that will warrant our engagement, and that will inevitably have us asking, what is the opportunity cost of doing this for something else? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councilors Leary, Humphrey, Kelly, and a number of others after that. Go ahead, please, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The strategy, in my mind, is that we let the residents of the city of Newton and our Community Preservation Committee make those important decisions, and we support them on that. So historic preservation is a really important public benefit. And one of the few ways for them to get funding is through the Community Preservation Act. And historically, our historic spaces have been underfunded. And the CPA also requires spending. It has targets, right? Historic preservation has a target, recreation, affordable housing, parks and recreation. So there's nothing more important, I think, in terms of the CPT in preserving our sacred spaces, whether they're religious institutions or whether they're municipal buildings. This is what the CPA is for. So I think I got on my stump earlier and talked about the CPA and how important it is and how much I do support this project, just like I did with the Grace Church project. And I just want to say one more thing that hadn't been mentioned, was that you can't actually, the Supreme Court actually ruled that you cannot exclude religious entities from public benefits. keep in mind, a lot of our religious institutions are some of our most cherished institutions and buildings and sacred spaces. So I would really urge that we support the CPC, the citizens of Newton, in supporting this wonderful church, this sacred space, this area where this space where people use for concerts and for other public gatherings that are really important to our community. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Leary. Councilor Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm appreciative of the change that the CPC recommended. That being said, this is our third request for community preservation aid to a religious institution, and it will be my third vote against. Not specific to this project, as many people have said. This is something that, you know, there's plenty of good arguments for, and I'm very sympathetic to both the need for the historic preservation and also that a lot of these type of projects have become much more expensive than they historically were, which can be difficult for the entities to deal with. That being said, I'm not that interested or persuaded in the legal arguments or even the Supreme Court rulings on this, because I think there's a matter of principle here. I'm intensely committed to public secularism, and I think that we've crossed that line, whether or not the lawyers have come up with arguments to say that we haven't. And additionally, there's a liability issue here, which is kind of something that Councilor Mickley touched on. One of the reasons that I opposed the first one that was brought to us was because I knew it would immediately open the door to a whole bunch of requests, which it has, and it will continue to. You know, some of you are involved in various religious institutions in the city and are familiar with their various financial situations and membership situations, but it is true that a lot of these organizations are historic legacies, but many of them are in terminal decline in membership. There are some of these institutions in the city that are down to, 5 members or something like that. And there are other alternatives here, right? There are communities where churches and so forth have sold the property, but maybe to a nonprofit entity or something like that, and then become a lease-back tenant in their former property, and then the municipality can give money to the nonprofit that's providing all these community benefits, the type that we're talking about, to many different organizations. But there's going to be an endless number of requests. And in many cases, they're probably all worthy requests from a historic preservation standpoint. But it's not necessarily our job to do hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in bailouts to congregations that are not facing their fiscal realities and are probably not going to bounce back. And there are other solutions that would allow them to maintain these buildings without us having to do public taxpayer dollars to bail out these religious organizations. I know that's not a popular opinion, but I think somebody needs to say it. So I'll be voting no on that. And so Councilor Mickley will not be alone on that. I'm glad he's joining me on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Humphrey. I have Councilor Kelly, Lucas, Kalis, and then I have a number of others.
Did that mean I'm next?
You are next,
I
Councilor
lost
Kelly.
track. Thank you. Unlike Councilor Humphrey, I have a lot of respect for the legal interpretations and the value of the precedents that have been put forth in this. I also, as Councilor Leary alluded to, I have a lot of faith in the CPC. It is their job to look at this and to set goals and priorities and follow their own guidelines. And in this case, it's not us who determines, though we do have to approve it. It is they who have decided this is important, they want to fund it. On the basis of the historic value of this structure, the community benefit, and I'd just like to quickly touch on how important it is for arts and culture and the public to have this performance space of the size that Councilor Danberg referred to, the acoustic quality, just the space, the size, and the acoustics are really important. And it's not just for arts and culture, it's also for community use. The amendments that were made, I think, make sense, and I concur with them. This is not solely for religious use of a private organization, so I will most definitely be voting yes for this.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. I have Councillors Lucas, Kalis, Grossman. Councillor Lucas, go ahead, please.
Thank you, President Laredo. I'm going to vote in favor of this project, just like I did the Grace Church from a few years ago. This project reminds me of something that hits close to home because my great-grandmother founded a church in Roxbury many, many years ago. And about 5 years ago, Historic Boston secured Boston CPA funds to fix up the church. And they still needed more money, but Historic Boston got the funds for the church, and the church is going to be used as community space, performance arts space as well. It could have been torn down, but they were able to save the church. And I see this project here in Newton Center, and it is identical to what happened with my great-grandmother's church. I'm happy that this CPC was able to put attach additional conditions to these funds to ensure that the city of Newton might be able to get some of their money back if the ownership of the church changes hands. I'm happy that the church is going to be required to use the space as community space. And I think this is an all-around good project and a good use of CPA funds, so I am voting yes.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. I have Councillors Kalis, Grossman, Baker, and then there's others after that. Councillor Kalis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I think some of the changes that have been recently done are right on point. I'm very happy about those, but I think Councillor Danberg and Leary really hit the nail on the head, and I'll be voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors Grossman, Baker, and Bixby.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to align myself with the comments of Councillor Danberg, who I think spoke very eloquently to the main points on my mind. I just wanted to add that at our last meeting, when this was before us, Councillor Leary made a point that I find very important, which is that this money is meant to be used. And it is meant to be used for the purpose of historical preservation. I believe that you cannot divorce our city's history from the reality that many of these buildings that are worthy of historical preservation have religious origins and continuing uses. To me, this isn't about bailing out a congregation at all. It's about preserving the beauty of our city and preserving the history of our cityscape. And I think that the community benefit in that alone is tremendous. And the rest of the community benefits of performance spaces. And I will also point out, actually, that most of these historic religious organizations are also the providers of affordable childcare for the pre-kindergarten population. So for so many reasons, I support this, and I just will also say that if we're worried about trade-offs of this versus other projects not getting funded, then proponents of those other projects need to come forward and do the work and come before us with proposals. These religious organizations in these last number of years have done that. And there's definitely a reward for that in the CPC process. So in any case, I support this. I hope others will as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grossman. I have Councillor Baker, Bixby, Gentile, Wright, and Maliki.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry I'm on one of these on a phone, and it's harder to make it work right. But let me just try and clarify something. My memory is that I don't have the grant in front of me because of the device I'm using, but is for the restoration of the tower. The issue of the use of the space is a benefit that comes from restoring the tower, because right now the tower is in a perilous condition and the interior space cannot be used. So first, I think it's important to recognize that my understanding, and if others can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the funding is really for the tower, not for the community space. So that is a distinction between the operation of the church and the historical value it provides to our community for its physical aspects. Second, the language of the amended version of the grant, and the clerk may want to put it on the screen at some point just so everybody knows what it is, says that the church will continue to provide community access during its period of ownership, but also require any subsequent owner to provide the same kind of access, subject to the condition that the $2 million that would be the city will provide could be reimbursed to the CPA fund on a pro rata basis on a declining balance amount by a subsequent purchaser. So if this happens a number of years out, the number will be small. If it happens nearby in time or near in time, it would be very large, obviously very close to the $2 million. But I think the intent here is that to provide a vehicle whereby the property tower can be preserved that allows the community space to be reopened, and we hope that its use will continue. But I think everyone should be clear on what the conditions are that we're voting on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilors Bixby, Gentile, Wright, Maliki, and I think that is it for the evening. Go ahead, please, Councilor Bixby.
Thank you. This is something I've struggled with a lot because I do have a number of concerns. This is an incredible building, which is a space that does so much for our community. And yet I personally do have questions about using this amount of city dollars for a church tower. One of the things I hope we can come out of tonight and take out of tonight is that I think we would benefit from a proactive plan for the fact that we have, I believe, 47 churches that are more than 100 years old in Newton. There are so many things that we can and should do as a city that are CPA eligible, and I hope that we can do those things and make a plan for them. However, like councilors have said previously, tonight we don't have competing projects in front of us at the moment, and we do have a project that is central to our history and our community. While there are many projects that I would like to see happen, and I hope that we can make happen, we're looking at this one, which is in the heart of Ward 6, and which has brought so much to it. So I will be supporting this project this evening, and I also hope that citizens who are paying attention to this and watching really do understand what CPA funds are for, that they are for these specific purposes, and that it's not funds that can go to many other things in the city that folks might want to see. We've had so many questions and really difficult conversations as a city about funding for schools and many other things that need to happen. These are not for those projects. CPA funds go to these specific categories, and so that's what we're looking at tonight. So I do hope that we can come out of this with a bigger conversation about this type of historic preservation, but I will finish my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bixby. Councilors Gentile, then Wright, then Maliki.
Thank you, Mr. President. I asked to speak because I wanted to make sure it was clear to everyone exactly what we were voting. I think that Councilor Baker pretty much took care of that. I want to he didn't mention exactly how many years, because there was a question about that earlier this evening. The deed restriction is for 30 years, not some lesser number. So the deed restriction that calls for community access is for 30 years, and it's spelled out in the agreement. So that's the first thing. And as Councilor Baker already said, a subsequent buyer can buy their way out of that agreement, but they would have to return money to the city. It's not the full $2 million. The city would not get the full $2 million because it is prorated, as Councilor Baker said. So having said that, I do plan to support the item.
Thank you, Councilor Gentile. Councilor Wright, and then Councilor Maliki. You're going to be our last one for the evening, I think. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I will be supporting this, but I hope going forward that we put into the contract that the city has the first right of refusal. This is an iconic space for music and other performances, and it's right in the village center. And I did bring it up at the CPC meeting, but they didn't want to add that, and I hope in the future they would, because I think if this space would go for sale, the city would buy it, we could put on affordable housing in the back and still keep the church for performance space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Maliki.
Ooh, thank you. I'm functionally an atheist, basically, and I actually have no reservations about using CPA money for buildings that have a religious ownership. My reservation had been that, and kind of still is, that since the vote on the Grace Church, which I felt pretty comfortable with, we've seen the process that's ongoing with the former Swedenborgian Church in Newtonville, which, although it's landmarked, we're going to be seeing it turned into, pretty much luxury condos and holes punched in the roof to create windows or skylights. And, I would not want to see that happen to the First Baptist Church. Basically, I'm supporting the project and the funding because I think that's the best chance of preserving the church as it is and preserving the performance space. I would not be supportive of such a large amount of money just to preserve the exterior of the church, as beautiful as it is, were it not also such an important performance space that we want to get back. I think the only time I've been in it was the last Martin Luther King Day celebration just before COVID hit, and that was sure a lot better venue than the Newton North Auditorium, as nice as that may be. So I'll support the project. I would have felt more comfortable if there were sort of more of a perpetual agreement that the interior space that is so valuable would be preserved. And I guess I would ask all the organizations, the musical groups, the community groups that are so supportive of this project, so that they can keep using the space, that as the years and decades go on, that you continue to use it and keep the pressure on the church ownership, even if their membership starts to decline, to keep the space as it is and keep the public use that we're counting on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maliki. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this item? Councilor Getz.
As I had mentioned in the beginning, I am supportive of the restoration of the bell tower, but I am concerned that we are not, as Councilor Maliki has suggested and Councilor Wright suggested, thinking forward in terms of decades down the road of what potential use these village center iconic buildings will be for the community. So I appreciate you suggesting that we have our community groups put pressure on the actual congregations to think forward and to think about beyond the 30 years of the use of these buildings. And I really appreciate the idea and the suggestion of ultimately having, if not the city having first right of refusal, then either the Affordable Housing Trust or the Newton Housing Authority having some sort of access to the lots.
Thank you, Councilor Getz. Is there anyone else that wishes to be heard? All right, seeing none, we are going to vote on this. Let me just remind everyone, a yes or an aye vote is in favor of this funding. A no vote is against the funding. Madam Clerk, call the roll, please.
Councilor Albright.
Aye.
Councilor Baker.
Aye.
Councilor Bixby.
Aye.
Councilor Block.
Aye.
Councilor Danberg.
Aye.
Councilor Downs. Councilor Farrell. Councilor Gento.
Aye.
Councilor Getz.
Aye.
Councilor Greenberg.
Aye.
Counselor Grossman,
Aye.
Counselor Humphrey,
No.
Counselor Kalis,
Aye.
Counselor Kelly,
Aye.
Counselor Krinsman,
Aye.
Counselor Leary,
Aye.
Counselor Lipoff,
Aye.
Counselor Lobovitz,
Aye.
Counselor Lucas,
Aye.
Counselor Maliki,
Aye.
Counselor Mickley,
No.
Counselor Oliver,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
President Laredo.
Aye.
Try
Motion
Counselor
carries.
Downs again.
Pardon?
Try Counselor Downs again.
Oh, is she, I'm sorry, Counselor Down? Oh, she just joined. Hold on one second, let me promote her.
Thank you, Counselor Danberg. Counselor Downs, do you wish to vote on the item?
Yeah, I'm going to vote aye.
Thank you, Counselor Downs.
Thank you.
Motion carries 21 yeas, 2 nays, 1 absent.
All right, thank you all for really an excellent debate and discussion this evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.